Hi, I'm Terri Broussard Williams, and welcome to Fireside Chats with Firestarters. It's where we meet people that are part of the book Find Your Fire and learn how they create change in their own communities. But today it's a very special edition. It's an honorary Firestarter, Scott Andrew James. Scott actually helped me create the book Find Your Fire and kept me on track among all the things book related. So I thought it'd be great to introduce him to all of you. I've gotten so many emails and questions from you all about the book writing process. What does it take? When do you know you're ready? All those things. So Scott is here today to answer those questions and more. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Terri. Thank you for having me here. It's always fantastic to see you. And yeah, excited to talk about all those questions and more.
It's so funny. We got started it was like a year to the week to the date of the launch of Find Your Fire. And so we worked together for, I guess, a good 6 or 8 months before we realized that we actually live like 8 minutes apart.
Yes, that was nuts. We met and yeah, it was almost halfway through working together that we realized that. The pandemic had something to do with that, but yes.
It's just so funny how the universe always places you in proximity, with the people that you need to bring your story to life. And I feel like you did that for me. You took something that was inside my head and my heart and just brought it to life.
It was very inspiring to work with you and to just see this manuscript and everything that you're doing with it now, go from idea to just fire, to use the metaphor.
So Scott, one question that I've gotten from everyone is, how do you know when you're ready to write a book?
Yeah.
What's the first thing you should do?
Start writing. I think like a lot of things, start before you're ready. So the question of how do I know when I'm ready? If you're thinking about it, I would say you've probably already mentally started.
You're right about that.
And yeah, once you start collecting thoughts in your head, that's almost the first step. So a lot of people start unintentionally, but I think a better way, or the way that I'm going to choose to answer that question, is if you're thinking about writing a book or thinking about writing a book, I would say start with Post-its or note cards. So Post-its is actually a technique that I borrowed from my wife, who is and has worked for a long time as a UX researcher. And a lot of, if you've seen photos or been part of those workshops, and a lot of web work is done with Post-its. Mm-hmm. So the sort of literary or book writing version of that I'm much more I've been using for decades was the note card method, but they're the same thing. So basically you take a note card, which I happen to have on my desk, and you write one idea or one quote or one concept or one reference to a book, and then you just file it away. There's a guy named Ryan Holiday who has a great blog post we can put in the resources that outlines this method. And then you just sort of build them up. So rather than trying to keep it all in your head, you just sort of do that, and then later on you can sort them around. And it's the same thing with the Post-it notes. You can just put Post-it notes up, and before you know it, you got 20, 50, 100. And then once there's too many to sort of keep track of, that's when you're ready to start.
That's so funny. I actually didn't do that, but you said something that resonated with me, and said, once you decide to write it, you've already have it in your head. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how many times I started that opening paragraph, writing it in my head in the shower or in the car. And so I just started with little snippets in a Google Doc, which you're well familiar with my Google Doc method.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you're right. It's just taking those bite-sized tidbits and stringing them together. That definitely is a great way to get started.
Yeah, if you do it in a Google Doc like that, that's a good way to do it too. But whatever the process is of getting the pieces out of your head so that you're not running those loops is a good way. And then sometimes they fizzle out and you're like, oh, well, I just had 4 thoughts about that and now I'm not interested. And then that's not the book you're going to write. It's the other one that you keep putting things onto the Google Doc or the Post-it note, whatever it is.
I want you to tell us a little bit about your background. I've been so fascinated as I've gotten to know you over the past year about all the things you do, all the things you know, and
Yeah,
from helping authors write books to even writing poetry. Tell us a
mhm.
little bit about who you are.
Sure. Basically, I love seeing, ideas take form and take on life in the world, like have their ripple effect. And so I do it in two big ways. I am a book shepherd and a book coach, which means I take people from an idea, like you're saying, all the way to a published manuscript, the launch, and then everything you can do after that. So that's one way. That's like a gift that I give to the world. Like, how can I help people like turn their idea through this like archaic gauntlet of a process to turn it into a book that then takes on a new life. And then the other way is I'm a poet, and I've done that for, as long as I can remember. And I do commissioned poetry. I do public poetry is how I think about it. So I do live interactive poetry as opposed to like writing in a diary in my house. I do that too, but the poetry I love is where people give me suggestions and then I type it out on a typewriter, or people give me suggestions and then I speak it to a stage. People give me suggestions and I write it and then I mail it to someone on their behalf. And those are the two things I do.
That's so cool. You know, I guess I understand a little bit about how you do that just from having a background in extemporaneous speaking,
Yes.
but like how much more intense is it to think that, you're writing a poem and saying it out loud? Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about, what goes through your head while you're putting it all together.
Ideally, as little as possible. So I think the poem writing process for me is acting as a container, acting as a
Mm,
vessel. So I like to keep, or the way I think about it is, you know, kind of like clear out as much distraction as possible, and then just invite, the muses or spirit or creativity or any word that the mystery, like invite the mystery in and say, I always say yes to the mystery, and
mm.
I believe it. It's you know we'll see what happens, let's write this together. So I take the suggestion from the person, I take the mystery, and I take my own skill set, which is just, this is something I literally do every day and have done for my entire life, is just turn it into beautiful, fun, exciting words. And so I just love shaping kind of that mystery on either for my own self or someone else's behalf. And the main technique, I guess, to answer your question less vaguely, that I use is to just keep going. Like, writers talk a lot about resistance. It's the same with building a business. And, I really believe in that idea of like, the first thought is the right thought, and I'm going to build from there. And so just keep going.
That's awesome. I in Find Your Fire, I say that no movement moves alone.
Yes.
And definitely Find Your Fire did not move alone or by just me.
That's cool.
I want to talk a little bit about my Google Docs. Let's go back
Yeah.
to the Google
Let's do
Docs.
it. Let's talk Google Docs. Yeah.
Do you remember when I was just like typing out all
Mm-hmm.
these different things that could have been the title, and we
Mm-hmm.
just went back and forth, and everything you just said about how to get started is what you told me how to think about the title. Get rid of the thoughts in your head, think
Yeah.
very simply.
Yep.
Can we go back to that moment and talk a little bit about how we came up with Find Your Fire?
Yeah. What do you remember?
I remember what I just laid out. I remember like
Okay.
all of this like long list.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it started off way, way long. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
Terri, like 3 to 5 words. And then at one point I was like, I want a picture on the cover. And you're like, no, we will not do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will just have a strong cover. And you
Yeah.
said that people had to feel something when they saw it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I remember is there's a few things. I remember, you are so good at coming up with ideas. And so, yes, I remember a long list.
Long list.
A long list. And the list is the starting point. The list is emptying your mind, like you said, and then they all point, inevitably, in my opinion, they all point where to think about. And so a lot of times, like, just the way people's brains work is, what's a good metaphor or what's a good image? In your case, we landed on fire. So I'm sure that I gravitated toward that when we were talking, but also a title is one of those art forms or one of those messages that lives inside of these very simple forms. So something I remember telling you it's very grounding when you're thinking about a title is that there's a way to write, especially a nonfiction title, that is very classic. And it has a purpose. So the first, there's the main title and then the subtitle. And the main title is what you just said. It's usually 2 to 5 words. Occasionally it's just 1 word. But it's like a statement, and it doesn't need to make sense. It's a grabber, find your fire, like that. It doesn't you don't have to describe the book. You have to grab people and you have to get them interested, fascinate or surprise, all of those kinds of things. And then the subtitle is meant to explain the book. So, find your fire, how to, etc. Or, story might be a book that's, how to create a screenplay, wow your audience and, write a bestseller every time. Like, the subtitle is where you explain, and that's the purpose of it. And you put your keywords in there or something like that, so that people say like, oh, bestseller, that's what I want. Or, oh, screenplay, that's what I'm looking for. But the main title, it doesn't have those restrictions. That can just be that cool thing. And so I remember thinking about it that way and taking that huge, that list and being like, what's the thing? And then you can really just sit with it and say, what is it? Like, what do I visualize? What do I always come back to? And a lot of times I'll talk to people, and I know we did this. Once you talk to someone once or twice, so we did this together. People can do this with a book coach. People can do it with, their partner. They can do it with their kids, their friend, anybody. And just as you explain it, you're inevitably going to use the same handful of metaphors. And a lot of times those are very good clues on the way to your title, because they're conversational and, because everyone understands it. And that's what you're doing with a title. Grab and then explain.
I love it. And it was so good for me because, as you know, I am disciplined. I am metrics driven. I like to check those tasks off the list. Yes. And so I was like, yep, this is it. Let's go. And you're like, no, let's sit with it for a while. How do you feel? What do you see? And I think that helped me so much because, I became still and really lived in that title. So when I communicated to Jen, who's the graphic designer, who's beautiful artist that helped with the cover, I was able to tell her what I saw. And she brought it to life, even with, always say, and Scott knows I say this all the time, I get firecrackers of the brain. Yep. I see one thing and then everything comes at one time. And Jen even got the firecrackers of the brain.
Yes, that's very cool.
So I love that you were able to share that process with everyone. That's such a huge lesson that I learned from you. And it was a gift that we can see on the cover.
The other thing I tell people, just to tack this on, is that, people get very hung up on the title. We try to write the book in the order that we read a book: cover, title, and then, people try to start with the introduction and then write chapter 1 and then write chapter 2. And it's very hard to do that. Because often you have to write the whole thing, edit it, revise it, and then you know what it's about, and then you can introduce it, and then it's almost like you do it backwards, and then you can figure out this is the title. So we talked about this too, but I always encourage people to think about a title, but hold it loosely and think of it as a working title. And if you want to keep it after you finish the manuscript, great. If you don't, it's okay. Like, you don't have to, just because you thought about it 3 months, 6 months, 2 years before you finish the book doesn't mean you have to keep it. So that's also, but it's good to have it rather than, I don't know what it's called, because it does help to give it form, but hold it loosely.
Yeah. It's so true. Like, you evolve so much while you're writing,
Mm-hmm.
and your perspective changes so much. I remember writing the first chapter and sitting on my couch and crying because it was the day that the shooting occurred in El Paso, but that really wasn't the first time I had written that chapter. I'd already written it, but it did not feel as the story that I wanted to tell and what I lived through and what our country had lived through.
Yeah.
And so I definitely learned that from you. Like, if it does not feel right, it's okay to go back and to add to it or to tweak it. And even now, Find Your Fire has been out for a month because we're recording this in September of 2020.
Yep.
There's still a little more to tell. I've been talking about adding a little bit to the last chapter, expanding it a little bit to talk about everything that's happened since Memorial Day in the U.S., including George Floyd's shooting and Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And so I think it's important to tell people that even though it's a book, it can still be a living document.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And another thought in that vein is just, the book to me is a function, a way to decide, what's in the book and what's not. And this relates to what you're saying is, what do I want to talk about next year? What do I want to talk about 2 years from now? What do I want people to ask me for help with? That influences what lives in the book and what lives in a blog post or what lives in a talk or a workshop, because especially with everything going on in the world right now and everything that you're writing about, but really anyone who is working with just, education and activism and social change, like, things are just going to keep happening. And so you're never going to just sort of like write the definitive book on anything. It's always like, this is, my addition to the conversation, but then it plays that role because what you title it and what you put in the book functions as a signal of, this is what I want to be working on. And it's a difficult, it's asynchronous, because people are often writing about the past year of their life. And as you write the book, you're sort of processing it and filtering it and figuring it out for yourself. So that's why a lot of the chapters change. And then by the time you publish it, sometimes it's been 2 or more years since some of the catalyzing events for that book started. So it's an interesting interplay, whether those events were, in your own life or in the world. But yeah, what you're saying is very, very true. It is a living document, and it's something that sparks, the next 2 years of your life, as opposed to only documenting the last 2 years.
It's so very true. Definitely takes you on a different journey or path than you imagine. But I do want to underline something that you said, and it's that the book is one piece of that message, but you have the opportunity to tell the rest of the message through blog post or podcast or whatever, especially for people that are similar to me and might want to teach people something or serve as a thought leader. There's so many ways to get that message out. And I love that every time we would start talking about what went in the book, we talked about what would go in the book and what would live beyond to help that story continue. Well, one thing that I told you quite often was that I wanted to be an A student, and I was a good student. I would learn all the things that you would teach me. So
you're amazing. Yeah. You went above and beyond repeatedly. That's why it's out there and doing so many good things. Yes. All right, continue.
So I wanted to give you a moment to ask me a question or two. So you could test to see if I really was a good student, if I learned.
Okay. Well, my favorite's the wrong word, but it's a favorite for me because it's so powerful, but it's very, very challenging for everyone. So what was resistance is fascinating to me. And I mean that as in resistance, like writer's block type resistance. Everyone has resistance to, I have something to say, but I'm afraid to put the book out in the world because fill in the blank. And the process of writing and publishing a book, there's all the mechanics that I work out with people on, which are learnable and doable, especially when you're motivated. But that part of the resistance that either gives you writer's block or keeps you from publishing it, you butt up against repeatedly, and you have to get through it. So what are there, I would say for you, do you recall an event or something that you did that helped you wrestle with that resistance dragon and get past it, or at least live with it?
Yeah, I think I was so driven on being done and getting over the obstacle of thinking that I couldn't write, that I got so caught up in that. And then, as you know, but people that are watching might not know, last September, I had a concussion and got hit in the head and could not be on my computer for a while. And so I think that was just a test if I was going to let it stop me. And I also wanted to get this out much quicker than most people did because I was determined to get it out. And so I feel like for me, the resistance was letting go of the process, like not having to orchestrate it all. Even to the point where in March, we sat down, you were the very last meal I had before we went into quarantine.
Yes, me too.
Crazy. And we were scheduled to drop Find Your Fire in March, and it was going to be on the special date for me, my grandmother's birthday. And we had to have that conversation about it being later. And I was still resistant at that moment, but you were like, it's going to be okay. You can't own all of the process. It's a message that is inside of you, but a message that will be revealed to you within the universe. And so I remember telling you, finally giving in. I think it might have taken a week or two.
Yeah, it was not one conversation. Definitely.
Not one. But finally saying, okay, I understand. But what I never knew was the gift and the message that the universe would reveal to me, and all of the tension, all of the civil unrest, all of the moments that would really, call people to want to take action. And that made this book more right now than it was in March. But still been fun, right? But now this is the answer that people are looking for, to give themselves a sense of calm, a sense of belonging, a sense of becoming a leader that will turn a moment into a movement. So yeah, I think that was the biggest lesson that I learned in the obstacle I had to overcome.
Yeah. Your book is very alive right now. That is, yes, it is amazing. The gift that the overcoming that resistance turned out to be.
Yeah.
And that makes me think of a second question, which is, I know that something that you have said to me and to other people is that working together, there was a moment where you sort of were exhausted. That's my word. So you can define it differently if you want to, but you were just like, I'm done with the book. I want the book out there. And I said, you should do X, Y, Z, and it will be worth it. You will be happy.
You told me that on 3 different occasions.
Okay. Well, talk about those moments, because I think those are, everyone runs into those.
It's true. I was so just tired. I mean, we had been working on it for a year, which in book standards is not very long, but in Terri standards, hurry up already,
Yes.
And I can say it now, but I don't know if I would have recognized it then. I just felt this pressure that people were expecting something, that I live on this timeline, and, I graduated from college in 3 years, like I never lost a bill as a first time lobbyist, like all these things, was starting to feel that pressure, which is something that I'm not trying to live in that space anymore. So there are like all these things that were starting to line up, and I was just like, I'm just done. Like, I'm tired. I can't do anything else. There's so much on my plate. And I was just like, we can go with all these errors.
Yeah.
Like, can you hear yourself right now?
Yeah. Oh, that looks like that. Let's do it anyway.
It's good enough. Just go. Yeah. And then we were talking about the font, and I'm like, I can't, most people don't know this, but I can't see up my left eye or hear up my left ear. So I like need glasses with like glasses. And so I can't see things like normal people. Yeah. And you're like, get out a book and look at the book. Is it like the book on yourself? I'm like, I can't see.
I did say that, yeah.
But you were totally right. And had I did that, I would have not been myself. I would have not lived up to my own expectations, although at that moment I was done with them all. And so I tell everyone that you were more than a book coach. You were that accountability partner that I needed. And so you held me true to that very first conversation we had where you were like, what do you want out of this? And I had one of those lists. You held me up to my own list at the end of the day when I was too tired to think or too weary to want.
Oh, nice. That's
I
a
just
good
made
phrase.
a poetry on the spot.
You did. That was it. We've traded places. I'm asking the questions and you're writing the poetry. I love it.
Well, speaking of us working together, I want to talk a little bit about this project that we're working on.
Yes.
But before I get into it, this is one of my favorite gifts to give to people. It's a book of poetry that Scott wrote, and it's beautiful. There's watercolors in it, and poems, and all the things. Yeah. So we want to kind of bring these two things together. Scott, what are we going to do with these two things?
We are going to do something super exciting. And at some point this fall, I don't believe we've nailed down a date yet, we have 7 topics that keep coming up. So we're going to publish 7 articles by you, amazing storytelling, big and deep, and 7 poems by me, speaking to these 7 topics for a week. So 7 days of digging deep on the experience of people. And then at the end, there's going to be an ebook, and it's going to be available for everyone. So it's a week of articles, poetry, and then they will become a book.
Love it. I'm so excited. I cannot wait.
Yes, everyone should. It's going to be a journey. So it's the kind of thing like, we'll definitely invite you to read them all by yourself, bring a friend, invite someone who could use some inspiration and some fire.
Yes, bring some light into the world.
Some light. Absolutely.
Before we wrap, I want you just to share a little more again about how you help writers, how you bring, art into life and in the public space. Tell us a little bit about how we can find you and all the things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for, if you're thinking about a book, where I live online is Scott James Consulting. So my name is Scott James, scottjamesconsulting.com. So you can go to that. And I help people, coaching along the way, and people come to me at all different points. So if you have an idea, or if you have a manuscript, or if you're halfway done, or wherever you're at in the process, people come to me and say all kinds of stories. And then we say, well, let's do this with it. So if you're sort of overwhelmed or getting stuck, that is the perfect time to call me. And I'm developing a series of workshops for this fall, so there'll be chances to sign up for those. But really, just if you have an idea that you want to turn into a manuscript, and especially if you are a business owner or a solopreneur and you want to use that book as a business asset, like lead generation, speaking opportunities, affect some sort of change and impact in the world, that's my specialty. So I love working with people, who are not authors by trade. They may write, this may be their first book, and it needs to be a good one. That's what I do.
You help people find their fire.
I help people find their fire. Yeah. And because especially right now, if you're someone who has a business and you live on the web, you write blog posts, you do social media, you know, like you were pointing to, the process of creating a book and taking something that's super meaningful and literally from like the deepest place in you, or like really consolidating a decade of work that you've done into something that is going to be in print and out there in the world. Number one, it takes way longer than people think that it's going to. And it's really tumultuous almost every time. And there are so many archaic little gears in the background of publishing a book that I love helping people navigate that process, because, you know, it's very, very possible to save literally thousands and thousands of dollars by making one choice versus the other, or, you know, printing a certain way, or all these things that, you know, nobody wants to like spend the 10 years like I have becoming an expert in. You just want to like write the book and then build on it. So I like being, you know, that guide. Like I said, it's part of my mission in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for helping me bring my message to the world and live out my personal mission and core values every day. I could have not done it without you. And I will tell everyone that from sea to shining sea.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been an honor always to work with you, and it's super fun talking to you today. And I'm looking forward to our book, our project.
Yes. So if you want to get a copy of our ebook, you can just follow us at Terri B. Williams on Instagram, at Scott Andrew James on Instagram as well. Yes. We will definitely post all the details there, but you can also get on both of our websites, and we have those below for you. So thank you all so much for watching Fireside Chats with Firestarters and this honorary Firestarter. You can see exactly why. Just keep following me at Terri B. Williams for all things movement maker and how you can be a leader that will turn a moment into a movement.